This is Session 5 about ICT applications for disaster preparedness. The objectives of the session are to provide an overview of what is disaster preparedness, how ICT can provide supporting information, and to provide examples of ICT use in disaster preparedness activities. So what is disaster preparedness? It is the readiness of governments, organizations, and communities to respond constructively against the threats from hazards in order to minimize the negative consequences to lives and properties. So what are some disaster preparedness measures? You may know many or all of these. We have warning systems. We do contingency planning for different kinds of hazards at different levels. We have emergency exercises and training. We have an emergency communication plan as a measure. We do evacuation plans and train on implementing these plans. We have critical services of health, utilities, and government that have to function during an event. We have resource inventories for relief goods such as food, medicine, shelter, but also for a number of people with necessary life-saving skills and equipment to rescue people. And finally, we have public information and education about the possibility of an oncoming hazard, when it may strike, how long it may stay, and what people have to do in order to prepare themselves. So what are these information needs for disaster preparedness? Well, basically it is the same as the needs that we have for mitigation in terms of understanding threats and risk levels. But also, we this time add alert levels. Is it a red alert, meaning the threat is imminent, it's at your doorstep? Or is it only an orange alert, or a yellow alert, or a white alert, where we have less degrees of severity? Or even an alert to let us know the threat has passed. We also need information on the location of pickup points where we may be rescued, and the location of evacuation centers where we may proceed for safety. And we need to know safe routes, what routes we can take on foot or on vehicles in order to arrive at safe locations. So now let's see some ICT applications for preparedness. Usually these are involved in monitoring and observing hazards, in analyzing the data for preparedness planning, in sharing information and networking among concerned people, in communication and warning dissemination, and for recording and storing data on inventory and logistics. So how are ICTs used for early warning systems? We need ICTs for sensors to monitor the hazards. We need them for telemetry in order to send the data from the sensor to a computer storage facility. We need communication equipment in order to pass the early warning along from those who are doing the hazard monitoring to the at-risk communities. And we need computers in order to do the analysis. The next slide shows the communication technology that has been used for emergencies. And we can see a wide variety, from radio and television and telephones to SMS, mobile phones, and satellite radios, even amateur radio, community radio, the web service, sirens, and social networking. All of these have been used now for communicating about emergencies. And so, in disaster preparedness, it is good to invest in these communication technology. GIS and remote sensing and telemetry have been used to gather data about hazards such as floods, cyclones, drought, earthquakes, landslides, and volcanic eruption. They are used for hazard detection, measurement of the hazard, and mapping where they may be, and performing early warning. Now we are looking at a slide that shows a database website from India. Here they have the inventories that they need for emergency response. You can search on this database inventory. If, let's say, you are requiring some equipment, then you can search in this inventory and find out which local government in India has particular rescue equipment, and then you can borrow it for your use. The next slide shows two maps that were developed for earthquake contingency planning for Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. These maps show the aggregated analysis of different data sets relevant to earthquake risk. And then they use the data to analyze where certain parts of Dhaka may be more or less at risk to earthquakes in terms of number of people that will be killed and the number of structures that will be damaged. Now we're looking at a slide that shows how satellites are used to track cyclones from one part of the Pacific Ocean to another, and also for the Indian Ocean. So satellites are responsible for specific zones. These satellites are managed by different countries who own and have launched and operate them. And then the countries agree on passing information along as the cyclone moves out of one zone and into another zone. This means that as a cyclone moves out of a zone, it is out of the operational area of one satellite and enters the operational area of another satellite. In this way, we can distribute or share the cost for running a complete network around two oceans, and at the same time, several groups of countries can benefit from them. Now, we have an example of the Cyclone Preparedness program in Bangladesh. This started way back in the early 70s after a particularly devastating cyclone went through Bangladesh. What they realized was that they can have a network that starts from a central point in the country and then spreads out to the different levels of local government using a network of volunteers at the very bottom to warn villagers about an oncoming cyclone. Now, they developed this system so that they can ensure that the poorest and most vulnerable and living in far-flung areas are going to be able to get the cyclone warning that they need. Now, this is supported by analysis and decision-making at a central point. So now we come to the summary of the session. What should we remember? First, disaster preparedness requires hazard monitoring and prediction, analysis, and preparedness measures. ICTs can help improve our prediction capabilities. It can help us monitor hazards. ICTs help increase our analytical capacities. And finally, ICTs provide options for what could be robust emergency communication systems. So I hope you found this session on ICTs for disaster preparedness interesting. Thank you.